Yeah, so we're getting the smoker set up here. The offset 500 gallon wood fire smoker. Fat stack. Get these open so we can get some airflow going here. And then got some paper back here, but let's get the fire started here. Got the white oak. This last batch of wood that I got, the splits are a little small. They still work, it takes a little more maintenance on keeping the fire going. Can't take as long as naps in between adding wood, is what I'm saying. But it works. Okay. Get some more paper in there. We got a big weed torch that goes on the 20 gallon or 20 pound propane tank. That's in my trailer right now. I forgot to grab it last time I was down there. But that, I just set it here and it's like a flamethrower. It starts this thing in an instant. But this will work. This works for now. The wood's pretty dry. So started out, moved into the first house that I lived in on my own just about a month before I got married. And the house I moved into was a little 1-bedroom, 500 square foot home. It used to be a coal miner cabin out in Enumclaw, built in 1912. Long story short, shortly after moving in, figured out there's quite a bit of wood rot in the kitchen, so we tore all the kitchen cabinets out. Was able to get some free cabinets from a buddy who was remodeling his kitchen, and ended up being the same size. But anyway, so the kind of put everything on hold, getting ready for the wedding, and long story short, came home after a wedding to a house with no kitchen. But my best man and his younger brother, as a wedding gift, gave me a 18-inch Weber kettle, just the classic Weber kettle barbecue. This was September 2010, so still decent enough weather outside. Long story short, while we were finishing the remodel in the kitchen, the Weber kettle was how we cooked food outside. And up until that, I always enjoyed being in the kitchen, make mostly like breakfast stuff, hash browns, eggs, stuff like that. But running the Weber kettle with charcoal, throwing wood chunks on there, really out of necessity, and just being outside cooking with fire, and figuring out how to cook things that you would normally cook inside. Like, I don't have a stove right now or a kitchen, so I'm gonna figure out how to cook this thing on a charcoal grill. So started cooking a lot of different things, trying different steaks, ribs. Was salmon running the Puyallup River that year, so brought home some pink salmon, cooked some salmon steaks, salmon fillets, and just really enjoyed doing that. Was starting to get decent results after a little while. Burned a lot of food, but also learned a lot. So shortly after that, started just taking pictures of everything I did, just so I could remember everything that I cooked, and then started putting stuff on Instagram, just kind of as a personal blog, just to remember everything I did. And people that I knew, friends and family and coworkers, started following that, and then kind of got a reputation as the meat guy. And then from there, it just kind of grew into cooking for larger events. But yeah, that's the story of how it all got started, and kind of where the love for outdoor cooking and cooking with fire started. Was really out of necessity, not having a kitchen, and going from there. So the cooking turned into smoking Really the first thing that I smoked was, I believe it was a rack of spare ribs, and it's still on the 18-inch kettle. I've done stuff in the crock pot, just slow cooking, and like that I cook ribs in the oven, just low and slow. Turned out really good. Texture-wise, you don't get a ton of flavor or bark that way. But just as I'm online looking up recipes, you know, looking up ideas, just keep coming across ribs on this Weber kettle, and a couple different ways you can turn your kettle into a smoker. And so I use one called the snake method, where you light a string of charcoal that goes around the circumference of the smoker. You light it at one end and it just has a slow burn all the way around. In the meantime, you layer some wood chunks on top of that, so you're getting the charcoal and the wood just doing a slow burn, and you can really only fit one full rack of ribs on the 18-inch kettle. So did that. It's about a 4 to 6 hour cook to do one rack of ribs like that. First couple ones didn't turn out that great. I ran it too hot. They got pretty dried out, but there was still some bites in there that were really good. So I kept trying that, getting that dialed in. And then that was probably once every couple months I do ribs, just because the time commitment, you know, it's a little bit longer than grilling steaks. Started doing that and enjoying it. It's kind of a hybrid of slow cooking versus smoking. There is some smoke involved, but it's not a true smoker. Really, you're kind of forcing your charcoal grill to act as a smoker. The biggest thing I cooked on that was a 20-pound prime rib. A few of my family members went on. It was like a $200 cut of meat. We went on for Christmas one year. The full 9-bone, full roast. That turned out awesome. That was great. Best prime rib I've made to date was on that little kettle. And that was, you know, smoked it for several hours and then cranked it up to get a good sear, good crust on it. Where the smoking part of it really took off was once we moved to Idaho. Started work at, you know, my current job, and it was around mid-October actually, and they were doing a company potluck, and I was new to the company and wanted to impress everybody, so I was like, I'll do some tri-tip. And I at that point just gotten a pit barrel smoker, so a 35-gallon drum where you light the fire at the bottom and you get racks and there's meat hooks, so your meat's hanging in this drum, and then it's burning charcoal and wood, same as the kettle, but just a little more volume. You got more room to cook. So I think I did 6 or 8 tri-tips that were hanging in there. That was kind of my welcome to Idaho moment. It was sunny and probably 70 degrees the day before. I brought the pit barrel to my office to cook there on site, and it was like 12 degrees and snowing the day of. So I ran back home, grabbed some towels. I had this whole thing wrapped in towels just because I couldn't keep the temperature up high enough. It was windy, and anyway, so just fighting the cold, fighting the wind, but made probably at that point was the best batch of tri-tip that I'd made. Fed about 30 people at the work lunch, and yeah, since then they started asking me to, you know, every couple months when we did one of these events, cook for that. So that was a good opportunity to experiment with different smoking different types of meats in larger quantity. So I did baby back ribs again, to try to a couple more times, and then started shopping for a bigger smoker, and ended up with the fat stack here, which we can get more into that later, but this will feed up to about 400 people. So yeah, just kind of evolved that way, as you know, from just grilling stuff on the charcoal grill into trying a few things on that same grill but smoking them, and going to that 35-gallon drum, and starting to cook for actual events. So open flame, your options, there's quite a few options for smoking meat, ranging from your electric smokers, your little cabinets that a lot of times for smoked fish, smoked salmon, you'll see in the electric smokers. And guys will do ribs in those too, and other smaller stuff. That when you plug it in, you set your temperature, you throw some wood chips in there, and it does its thing. You've got like a propane assist, which most of your commercial smokers are, their heat source is propane, but they've also got a small wood fire burning in there. Those are really heat efficient. They don't use a ton of fuel. So a lot of your delis and food trucks and stuff have that type of smoker. The most common one recently is the pellet style. I've always gravitated towards the wood. One, because I like playing with fire, and I think that just comes from my childhood growing up in Western Washington, harvesting wood all summer to heat the house all winter. Like, just always dealing with firewood, and learned real young how to manage a fire. And so there's some nostalgia there for sure. Half of the fun for me of cooking is playing with fire, building a fire, and having an open flame going. Keeps you warm in the winter time too. Versus these, pellet grills, other types where the flame's a lot more contained. As far as the quality of the food, the product that you get from it, it's night and day different. The other types of smokers are geared towards efficiency. So how do we keep as much of the heat and smoke inside the cooker and get the most out of it? Which means it results in having to run a smaller fire. Like, look at the pellet grills, and it's this little cup full of pellets with this little flame in it, and then you have a smokestack on those usually, but it's still fairly airtight, so they're trying to keep as much of that smoke in, which means you get colder flame, you get a dirtier smoke, and you end up getting, it's just kind of a funky flavor that you get from it. It's convenient going that route. But again, the playing with fire is half the fun of it. So, and plus you don't have to plug it in. Like, I can rain on this thing, and I'm not worried about shorting something out. So, versus the wood fire, the open flame, it's the exact opposite. Like, it's geared towards burning the hottest fire you can, running the cleanest smoke that you can, which means you need to have a lot of airflow, because to run a clean fire, you need oxygen, you need air moving through it. So you go through a lot more wood. So your wood fire management is a lot more involved. You're burning more fuel, so your cost is a little bit higher. Plus, you're feeding the fire every 45 minutes to an hour versus, a pellet grill. You just plug it in, and when it's done, it's done. But what happens is you get a lot of airflow, so you get like a convection effect. It's like a convection oven, where the smoke's actually moving through the cook chamber, which actually helps the temperatures be a lot more even across the board. The air moving across the meat, I'm not sure exactly the science behind it, but as far as a bark formation, it creates an actual, almost like when you toast a marshmallow and it's brown or just starting to turn black, you can peel that bark off. That's like the best part of the marshmallow. You get that kind of bark a lot easier, and it's a lot more tangible bark when you're cooking with an open flame versus something that's charcoal or pellet. So the trade-off is you're burning more fuel. It's a lot more time intensive in managing the fire, but at the end of the day, you get a better result. You're running. The biggest difference is the clean smoke versus the more smoldering, dirtier smoke. So that clean smoke, you can taste the difference. It's almost a sweet with a little bit of spicy, versus if you ever had something that was overly smoked, or maybe coffee that was brewed with water that was too hot and it tastes burnt, kind of has that burnt feeling, a burnt taste to it. You can tend to get that on other types of smokers where everything's more contained. So having a wide open cook chamber where your air is just moving through it, you get a lot cleaner, sweeter, a little bit spicy. So, especially when you're doing something like a brisket that's in the smoker anywhere from 12 to 18 hours, it's just a lot of time in the smoke. So the quality of the smoke is going to make a big difference, especially over that length of time. It's easy to over smoke something if your smoke is dirtier. The dirtier smoke has a lot more flavor to it, and it can be overpowering really quickly. One of the things with cooking, especially something as tedious as barbecue, live fire cooking, is you do get a result that you really can't get with any other method of cooking. And a lot of times when people taste a wood-fired barbecue, brisket or pulled pork or something like that for the first time, like, wow, this is awesome. What did you do? What rubs do you use? What pellets do you use? Kind of going into that. And I think a lot of people are surprised at how simple the process actually is, and how small of a part that I actually play in it. I'd always joke with people and they're like, oh, that's really good. What do you do? And I was like, I just add heat, which isn't far from the truth. Like, really, you start a fire, you put maybe some salt and pepper on a piece of meat, you maintain the fire, and you wait. You let the fire do its thing, you let the meat do its thing. And just the act of taking, we're surrounded by trees here, and these are grown naturally out of the ground, nourished by the sunlight, by nutrients from the earth, by rain, by the elements. To be able to take what's there naturally, and then you take a cut of beef that, you can attribute that to the cattle rancher that raised the beef, the farmer that raised the feed for the beef, the butcher, the meat packer, the grocer, the delivery drivers. There was a lot of people involved getting that cut of meat to a point where it came into my hands and is now in the smoker. So you combine that with, the wood that just comes from nature. It's a natural resource. And fire, it's one of the most basic elements, one of the most, the longest running tool that mankind has used, is fire. And just watching how when the fire burns, it brings out the elements in the wood that then transfer into your smoker and into this piece of meat that's cooking. And when it all comes together, just these raw, natural elements, things that came from the ground, animals, plants, when it all comes together, combined with, a lot of patience, just the result that you get is, it's pretty amazing to see how by going back in time and simplifying the process of cooking, you actually get better results than you do if you were to micromanage everything, use the latest technology, use electricity, use manufactured fuels like propane or pellets, things like that. So just really going back in time to a simpler way of cooking produces what most people would agree is the best result, best way to cook barbecue. It gets the best results. I think more people don't do it that way because it does take more work, and we're used to technology improving so many areas of our lives that I think by default we think, okay, this is going to improve the way we cook, and in a lot of ways it does. It makes it more convenient, and you can't really beat throwing a chuck roast in a crock pot and 8 hours later having really tender chuck roast. The convenience of that is there. But I think once you go down the convenience route, now you're trying to substitute for a quality that's no longer there. You don't get the same smoke, you don't get the same bark, you don't get the same overall experience. So that's when people start going overboard on, let's try different rubs, let's try different pellets, maybe we tweak the temperature, and you can go on all these forums online, and there's people that have these just very intense, detailed, precise way to try to micromanage and get the perfect brisket at the end of the day. And I'm over here just like, let's light a fire, let's put some salt and pepper on it, throw it in the smoker, and sip some coffee by the fire for 18 hours and watch the result. So, and at the end of the day, the work that went into getting that cut of meat onto my smoker, I feel like I owe it to everyone that was involved up to that point to really get the best result at the end of the day. And I get the best part of that, and best part of that process, because I get to see the finish line. I get to see that that piece of meat get across the finish line, and see people enjoy it. And a lot of times they try to give me the credit for it, and I could take some credit for it, but it really is all the other elements that came together to that point, and I'm just kind of the curator of all that makes sure that we get across the finish line with the best possible product. So, but it is just amazing how, by simplifying the process, simplifying the ingredients, and just going back to the basics of wood, fire, smoke, salt, pepper, beef, and patience, like you get a result that you can't get any other way. So, and I think, like I said, we owe it to that animal, for one. Like, that animal was alive to become food for us to eat. I think we owe it to the animal to prepare it as best as we can, and as well as owe it to everyone that took care of that animal up to the point of cooking it. So, another reason why I like live fire cooking, and barbecue in general, and the types of cooks that I do, is like, my theory is you're eating anyway, you're cooking anyway, and you can put in this much effort and get a product that's okay, or you can put in a little bit more effort and get a product that's an elevated experience. And when you go to some I guess retail barbecue, for lack of a better term, they're rushing the cook. They're using propane. They're doing other things that result in a lower quality of a product. So they compensate by slathering it with sauce and serving a bunch of sides with it. And now you're getting a bunch of carbs and sugar and who knows what else is going into it. But when you strip it all down to salt, pepper, beef, and smoke, you're actually, animal fat is one of the healthiest forms of energy that we can consume. And when it's clean fat, and when you're not adding sugars and these other things to compensate for poor quality, it's actually it can be a pretty big part of a healthy diet. And like I said, you're eating anyway, so why not enjoy that experience? And in doing so, you're actually creating a product because there's two ways you can enjoy an experience. You can go buy the junk food, the fast food. Like, I love a double quarter pounder with cheese from McDonald's. It's a lot of beef. It's greasy. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, but you don't feel good about eating that. But when you slice into a brisket and you get the rendered beef fat and you've got the bark, that's an even better experience than any junk food or fast food or most restaurant food, in my opinion. And it's actually a pretty healthy form of fat and protein to add to your diet. So that aspect of it, being able to contribute to a meal, being able to contribute to what someone's eating, being able to add some nutrients that taste really good. It's an unforgettable experience. And sure, if you go eat 3 pounds of brisket, you're not going to feel great, but a few slices of it, that's a good helping of protein. And so just seeing it as an ability to nourish people that
are enjoying what they're eating is probably one of the most rewarding parts of doing what I do. And I enjoy it too. I've gone a few times, done the carnivore diet, and it's awesome. That's good. So that about sums it up.